Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel. I've done one video like this where I read one-star reviews of my favorite books, but I thought it would be fun to maybe make it a yearly thing where I go through at the beginning of the year and read one-star reviews of my favorites from last year. I can't talk right now. Just because I think it's a fun thing to do, it's a fun thing to film, and I just enjoy it. So right now, I am sitting in front of the computer. I have my 10 favorites from last year pulled up on Goodreads, and we are simply going to peruse together. So I wonder if I should go in some sort of order. Maybe if I should go backwards through my top 10. So starting with number 10 would be starting with Rebecca. So Rebecca is a classic. It was published in the 30s, so we should have plenty of material here for bad reviews for it, because just any book that's been around for this long is going to get, I feel like, a little bit of everything towards it. Right off the top, we have Miss Kristen. She says, I hated this boring ass, pompous ass, dumb ass book. What I liked, the gorgeous cover. That's it. Everything else sucked. Why it sucked? Number 1, boring. Number 2, the main character. Never in my life have I read about such a dull, naive, idiotic, clueless, worthless, Forrest Gump look-alike, boring, stupid person. She reminded me a lot of my younger self, actually. I wouldn't want to know that person, let alone read about her. I would be embarrassed for her if I didn't hate her so much. She didn't even have a name, and that's probably because her parents knew she wasn't worth naming, since she would grow up to have absolutely no personality or brains whatsoever. First of all, I love the energy. This is how you write a bad review. You make it funny. Reason number 6 is, ooh, spooky plot twists. Please. I leave better plot twists than that in the toilet after my morning bowl of bran flakes. I kept saying to myself, there better be one hell of a plot twist for this boring shit to be worth it in the end. Nope, exactly what I guessed. I had a feeling it would rip off Jane Eyre, and I said if it did, I would burn this book. Looks like I better get some matches ready. Oh no. Please don't burn it. Okay, who else do we have? This person says, 1 star. Wow, this really sucked. One of the most boring books I've ever read. Well, you can't love them all. Moving on. Okay, true, you can't love them all. I can kind of understand why people say it's boring, because like there's not a lot going on. You're just following this woman in this obsession with her husband's ex-wife. And so I get how that could be boring and repetitive and stupid for a lot of people, but the writing was just so beautiful. I don't know how you can argue with that. Wow, I really hated this book. Melodramatic, bellowing prose, characters so paper thin and one-dimensional as to be cartoonish, and a narrator the consistency of oatmeal. Whining, childish, insecure, annoying. There's absolutely nothing in this book to examine/enjoy. I would disagree. At the halfway point in the book, the predicted plot twist came and I threw it across the room. I give up. Rebecca, it's not me. It is so completely you. I totally understand that feeling of like a totally predictable plot twist just coming and you're like, really? But for me, the plot twist in Rebecca is not something that I predicted. I remember I had watched the movie first, so I knew what it was before going into the book, but it still shocked me in the book. I was like, I know it's coming, but I guess the delivery of it, the way that it was written in the story, still shocked me, even though I knew it was gonna happen. Okay, we're gonna move on now to my number 9 book from last year, which was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. Javier says, this one's it. This is no doubt the worst book I've ever read. Okay. Fortunately, I read it for my beloved Thursday night book club. No matter how bad the book club meetings are always good. The 7-Year Slip is certain to put that premise to the test at our meeting. You know, I'm glad, Javier, that you get to go to your book club and have a good discussion about this book. Why is it the worst book you've ever read? I want to know. I need you to explain that one a little bit. The 7-Year Slip is criminally overrated. It falls short on pretty much everything that makes a good romance. Slow build-up, tension, hurt/comfort, fun banter, high emotional stakes. First of all, I do think that the build-up was slow. Not like it doesn't take long to get into the part where they meet, but then the connection of the two timelines is a slow build-up as you're following them. Tension, yes, that adds tension, is the mismatched timelines that they're in. I feel like they had a lot of fun banter, and I guess there wasn't really high emotional stakes, but the other stuff I don't really agree with. Clementine instantly falls in love with this stranger that appears in her apartment. 10 minutes later, the stranger is cooking her dinner. 20 minutes later, the stranger is sharing her bed. Did I mention that he's a stranger? Okay, when you say it like that, I do agree though, because I remember reading the book and thinking that it was a little bit weird that they got into the bed together, and I was like, okay, hold on, you just met him. But then I came to love him, so I didn't care anymore. Sam simply says, hate this stupid lemon book. And that's fair. Me, I love this stupid lemon book. Okay, number 8 for me is Moonbound by Robin Sloan, and I will be honest, I have read some of the bad reviews for this before, just because when I read it, I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to see what other people were saying. I think that the big thing that people were saying about this is, like, people that read a lot of fantasy or a lot of sci-fi fantasy were not really impressed with the world building and the different things in here, which I can understand, but this is one of the first real sci-fi fantasies that I've read, and I really enjoyed it. I think that everything was explained very well, and I wasn't lost at any point, and I loved the setting, and I loved all of the characters. Christopher says, this was genuinely a poor read from start to finish. I question the quality of readers who rated this 4 stars or above. That's kind of rude. Not even gonna lie, that's a little rude. Question the quality of readers. Okay, this book had an incredibly promising premise, a civilization blooming into the universe only for their best and brightest to return from the void and with a command to shut it all down. They call themselves dragons. Cool. What follows is a story akin to The Wizard of Oz, but with many interesting ideas disjointedly progressing. There was no bumpers between incredibly divergent settings, characters, or concepts. Things are introduced which are supposed to be important but never fleshed out. You're 85% done with the book and wondering when the plot is going to point the main character towards the dragons, yet you'll keep waiting. The final resolutions occur in the span of about 10 pages, and it's so sudden, random, and unsatisfying you'll realize you wasted your time reading about something which had all the potential in the world and failed miserably. Wow, okay, that is a lot to process. That did make me giggle that he said it's akin to The Wizard of Oz, because I could see that because we just have these characters like walking around, and they have a higher purpose, they have a goal in mind, and they're meeting all these quirky and funny side characters. I liked the ending of this book. I liked the conclusion. I thought it was satisfying. I'm sorry Christopher does not feel that way, but we'll just have to agree to disagree until he insults the quality of my reading. I like Dixie's review. Dixie gave it 1 star and said, "What?" with 3 question marks. And I like that it's tagged book club, because I'm sure Dixie went to her book club and said, what the hell did you make me read? And I appreciate that. I love that for her. She said, I'm not explaining this, just what? I've definitely had books that I've finished that and had that exact same reaction, so I love the energy, Dixie. This person said, DNF at 30%. Too weird and boring. Yeah. It's weird. Sometimes the shorter reviews are my favorite ones. I think there's not really a lot of 1-star reviews for this, which is cool, but most people, it seems like, enjoyed Robin Sloan's other novels and were disappointed by this one. And I do have, Mr. Penumbra's 24-hour library or something, whatever, by this author on my TBR. So hopefully that means since I love this one, once I read that one, I will love it even more. Okay, number 7 from last year for me was Head Like a Hole by Andrew Van Wey. Allie says, it's always the most gorgeous covers that fool you. And I know that feeling. There are so many times I pick up a book just because the cover is freaking gorgeous, and I'm like, there's no way a book with a cover this pretty is going to be bad. And then I learned my lesson very quickly with that. We have 2 reviews that mention a DNF. Tiffany says, DNF ... what the fuck? That's fair. I want to know, what point is it that she DNF'd? Like, what happened that she went, what the fuck? I'm not reading this anymore, and put it down. I'm really curious. Chris says, DNF, I just couldn't take it anymore. This book is batshit in all the wrong ways. Once again, I want to know, what point did you DNF? What was the last straw? Like, what was the thing that crossed the line and you were like, no. Catherine gave it 1 star and said, not scary. Okay, Catherine, has anyone ever told you that horror is not just about being scary? I'm totally joking, because I've definitely had this same feeling towards other horror books where I'm like, it's not scary. And I know that that's not what horror is only supposed to be about, but it's just funny. I want something juicy. I need a juicy, long review. I need somebody to write me another essay. Ashlyn says, don't be fooled by the blurbs or the awesome cover art. This is decidedly not cosmic horror. I'm really baffled at how many 4 and 5-star reviews this book has gotten. Some of the body horror scenes are creepy, but overall this is an unrewarding book. Also, I don't have the capacity to suspend disbelief enough to accept that ionizing radiation works the way this book describes. Okay, that's fair, because I don't know anything about that, so whatever. It's really interesting they say this is decidedly not cosmic horror, because the reason I read this book, first of all, it was on my TBR, but I read it specifically in a cosmic horror reading vlog. So it's interesting that they say that this is not cosmic horror, because I feel like it is. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to do my subgenre series, and especially to do that one about cosmic horror, is because I didn't fully understand what it was as a genre or a subgenre, and knowing that, I feel like I learned a lot in that vlog, and I think that this is cosmic horror. So I'm just really curious to see, well, I guess I won't see, I would be really curious to see Ashlyn's ideas on why they say that it's not cosmic horror, or what cosmic horror means to them. Megan says, this did not catch my attention at all. I pushed through and finished it because I didn't realize until about 150 pages in that I wasn't liking it. And I'm a sucker and barely DNF books. I genuinely just didn't care about the story or the characters. Megan, first of all, I think it's freaking hilarious that you got 150 pages into the book and said, oh, I'm not liking this. Like, you just, was it just a moment? It just sparked in your head and you were like, huh. Yeah, I'm not liking this. Just a funny way to word it. Also, Megan, I want 2025. I'm manifesting for you that this is your year that you start DNFing. If you are not enjoying something, DNF. Let us move on. Number 6 is To Be Devoured by Sarah Tantlinger. If I had to guess what most of the bad reviews are going to be saying, they're probably going to talk about how nasty this book is, how graphic this book is, and about the twist in this book. I could see probably a lot of people don't like the twist, so let's find out. Silas says, middle school level writing. Damn hard read. I don't agree. That was one of my favorite things about this book, is I thought the writing was so gorgeous. And I want to know what kind of middle schoolers that Silas knows that could write like this, because I know I could not write like this. Bren gave it 1 star and says, I can't look at Andy the same. Sorry, bestie. That's fair. Justified. If you know what happens in this book, that's justified. My number 5 read from last year was I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. I don't think that we'll have a hard time finding bad reviews for this at all. Stephen Graham Jones definitely has a very unique and a very odd writing style, and I remember struggling with it at first when I first started reading his stuff, so I feel like that's probably why a lot of people will be hating this one. Elizabeth says, with a title such as this, I was expecting a fast-paced, fun, gory horror romp. Instead, it was slow-paced, nothing happening, peanut allergy of a story. That's true, but that is Stephen Graham Jones. I do think it's kind of funny that it seems like this person probably picked it up expecting like a traditional slasher story, and then got brought into this book that is a satirical look at the slasher story and all of its tropes, and so it's really funny that it just didn't work if you are expecting an actual slasher. I told myself 2024 would be the year I start to DNF books I don't like, so here we are. I'm not wasting my time with this one. I gave it an honest go, about 30%, and I absolutely could not stay focused long enough to even understand this one. The narration in this is my main issue. Like I said, it's legit like reading the inner workings of an ADHD child. Genuinely, the continuity of this was terrible. I didn't understand the majority of what I was reading, and I just didn't like the main character at all. The narration was capturing every single thought as well as what was going on in the surroundings, and it just didn't make sense at all. Yeah. This is the critique I was expecting just towards Stephen Graham Jones in general. They also pointed out the format. 60 pages in a chapter should be illegal, especially this type of book. It just went on forever when it could have been broken into more digestible chunks. It really would have been a waste of time for me personally to keep reading this. I definitely understand that. I am a hater of long chapters. I like the short chapters. I like to feel like I'm reading so much quicker, but I don't think I've ever gotten like actually mad about something. I think a format and the way that the author chooses to write their book is a very personal choice. And even if I don't like reading a chunk of 60 pages in one chapter, I bear with it if the story is good enough. Carly says, in the kindest way possible, I felt like I was having a brain aneurysm reading this. Carly, I know where you're coming from. Melanie says, being trapped in the main character's brain is like a death by 1,000 paper cuts, endlessly, punishingly droning. This one is funny. Should be retitled, I was a teenage yapper. It's like listening to someone who doesn't understand social cues and talks about their entire life nonsensically so they can listen to their own voice and believe their irrelevant memories. Would be better as a short story or novella and less run-on sentences. Sheesh. That's pretty funny. I was a teenage yapper. In my number 4 spot, we had The Fisherman by John Langan. First of all, you can't say anything bad about this book because it's absolutely beautiful. And let's see what people are saying because they're wrong. This book is torture. It is the most god-awful, boring thing I've ever pushed myself to suffer through. Can I give it 0 stars? Wow, that's harsh. Okay. This book is so fucking pretentious and boring and unnecessarily long. I am screaming at you to ignore any positive review you've read about the book. Any good review you've read was written by a coward too scared to tell you it sucked. It more than sucked. It is sucking is drawn out to an excruciating, unnecessary length. This person is going off. It seems like the big issue that people are having with this book is that in like the middle of the book, we go off into this different story where our main characters meet a person and then this person tells them this story, and it kind of provides some history and some background, but I can definitely understand like getting lost from the original plot when this happens because it does go on for a while. So this review says, have you ever found something so repetitively annoying that it eventually grows from annoyance to frustration and then to anger, and then your anger keeps growing and growing and growing until it hits a tipping point where something just switches and the situation becomes hilarious in its absurdity. Yeah, I feel that. This book did that to me. I was driven to a state of slap happiness. I'd reach the end of a chapter and think, surely this is the end. There could be no more background info. All the water has been wrung from the cloth. But Langan, seemingly drawing from what must be a storied background in improv, said, yes, and his way into yet another chapter of background exposition. I found myself literally laughing in disbelief at the start of each new chapter that to continue to draw this out. There's no more meat left on the bone of the story, what little there was to begin with. The marrow has been sucked out. Even the grit and gristle are gone, but Langan won't stop until that bone has been ground to dust. And you, poor reader, are the tool that will serve as the abrasive. Wow, first of all, very well written. I really enjoyed that. That is just so funny. I totally relate to that in other points where you're like, okay, the chapter's over, thank God. And then it just keeps going. You're like, wait a minute. This book is supposed to be a cosmic horror. The only cosmic horror of it is feeling trapped within an endless eternity of boredom. Will you ever get out? Does the story ever get good? Will it ever end, or will you go mad first? I'm afraid I never fully made it out. I should have walked away when I still had my sanity. I finished, but at what cost? Apparently, I'm still trapped because now I've just spent a good few hours writing this damn review. Now my hate won't let me escape it. That was really funny. I respect it. Even though you're hating on one of my favorite books, I respect it because that was funny. Okay, next is Midnight is the Darkest Hour by Ashley Winstead. So let me filter through our 1-star reviews. 3 words: Twilight fanfiction, and not the good kind. This is one of the most common things that I've seen said about this book. But listen. I loved it so much. The references to Twilight, the like vampiric things going on in the background, and then the romance between the two, it's just, oh my goodness, I love this book so much. I don't have the right words to describe how cringeworthy this book is. I don't know how to properly, and without snark, describe how intensely I wanted to boot this book off of the highest cliff. I want to be able to kindly tell you how much I wish I could bury this book in the densest sand of the deepest ocean. I want to unread this book. Oh my good God. I'm sorry that you feel that way. This is the boringest book that ever boringed. Unfortunately, I have encountered yet another book that set out to bamboozle me, but even I didn't know what it was trying to lie to me about. I feel like my hands are tied. Am I reading too much into something as simple as a sad attempt at Where the Crawdads Sing fanfiction? Or was it actually just a boring book trying to be Southern Gothic mystery? Okay, that's a new one, Where the Crawdads Sing fanfiction. But just because they're both like Southern Gothic doesn't mean that they're similar. I guess I could get it though, because Where the Crawdads Sing, there was that like mystery crime element. I don't know, I read that book so long ago. If you took a shot every time this book mentioned Twilight or religion, you'd be 6 feet under. Yes, that would be a very dangerous game. This thriller was too heavily focused on dismantling the insanely religious town and referencing Twilight every other page to actually make it thrilling. As I was reading, I couldn't care less about the characters, and the twists weren't even shocking or interesting. I also hated the ending. This, I feel like, is justified. If you go into Midnight is the Darkest Hour expecting a thriller, expecting suspense or any thrilling aspects, you will be disappointed. Let's just put that out there. Okay, last but not least, because I feel like I've been recording for a really long time, I'm going to move on to my #1 book, which is Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, which I'm sure the negative reviews of this book could make the entire video on its own, because a lot of people are disliking it. They call it pretentious, they call it boring, they call it everything that made me love it. It is pretentious, it is boring, and that not a lot happens, and the horror doesn't really come in until the end, but I loved the way that it was written. I loved the characters. I loved the very slow buildup of this obsession and this reveal that we get at the end. It just worked so well for me. Right off the bat, we have Joe. Yapper Yapperson manages to say nothing in 277 pages. Yeah, what did I tell you? I said people are hating this because it's boring. What I think also would be a fun video to do would be to take 1-star reviews of certain books and then have somebody else like read them to me and see if I can guess which book that review is talking about that I've already read. Let me know if you would be interested in something like that. Maybe I can arrange for that to happen. Yvonne says, oh boy, am I going to get shit for this one. I was so bored during this story. I love Survivor Song, but the format, the characterization, how it felt like you were reading forever and getting absolutely nowhere. This is interesting because Survivor Song is another Paul Tremblay book, and I think that one a lot of people don't like either. I wasn't a super big fan of it. I think I gave it like 3 stars. It was okay, it was interesting enough, but it wasn't anything special. It was like your very basic survivalist type of story. These people going around during a pandemic, and it didn't do anything crazy. So I think it's interesting that this person really liked that one, but is not enjoying this one. I guess it does make sense because the other one is very action-packed. This one is the very much opposite, but it is interesting that a book that they enjoyed by this author was one of his more unpopular ones as well. They also go on in this review to say that this is a trope that's been overdone, it wasn't anything special, and it didn't bring anything fresh, which, like I just said, is how I felt about Survivor Song. So it's just interesting. People's opinions, I feel like, are so interesting. For a book called a horror movie, there's precious little here in the way of tension or horror. And if you have the resolve to see it out to the end, you'll be met with a self-indulgent circle jerk where another Paul Tremblay rolls his eyes, literally and metaphorically, at the horror genre. He's jaded, you see, by the state of horror today. If it only wasn't so crass and obvious, if only it was smarter and more highbrow. Such a tragedy for him, I'm sure. I, on the other hand, nearly chipped a tooth, gritting my jaw in ever-increasing fury as Tremblay's head wended its way further and further up his own literary ass just to declare how delectable his farts smell. Okay, the battery died, so I'm gonna see if there's just a couple more that stand out. Y'all are lying to yourselves about how good this book was. You wanted to alleviate your cognitive dissonance because this book was boring as fuck and you wasted your time, so you said it was a masterpiece. I felt like in order to understand this white man's manifesto, I need to be as high as possible to really grasp even a little bit of what Paul thought he was doing. Mans thought he ate for real, but in reality he gave us a boring story, which is disappointing because the premise is good and the unreliable narrator was promising at first glance. But overall it fell flat. And now I'm left not even beginning to understand anything. Don't waste your time like I did. Read anything else. Literally read someone else's grocery list. That's worth your time more. That is really funny. Maybe that's why I explained it. They said you gotta be high to understand what's going on, so maybe that's why I liked this book. Ooh, Alexis is coming in strong. This is the first review I have ever left, and I truly hope it prevents someone from wasting 6 hours they'll never get back. The characters are so unlikable, every single one. I have never been less creeped out, scared, terrified, unsettled, disturbed, nervous, interested, or invested in a book. By the time something truly unsettling occurs, it was way too late for me to care. I feel like the author tried way too hard to do something different. I like the passion. I'm glad that you hated one of my favorite books so much that it inspired you to leave your first ever Goodreads review. Let's do a speed run before I end the video. I hated this. Maybe one of the worst books I've ever read. I truly don't even know what any of this meant, and I might be dumb for that, but this book felt try-hard and pretentious, and half of it made 0 sense. This was probably the dumbest book I have ever read. I struggled to get through it and was hoping it would get better, but it didn't. Alrighty, I don't want to get too carried away with this and go on forever, but I just really like to do it because it's really fun. Obviously, no hate to any of these reviewers. Everybody has a different opinion, and some books that I love, other people hate, and books that other people love, sometimes I hate. That's just how the world works. So with all of that being said, thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you guys next time.